Welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys, sponsored by Checker. Background screens for your faith or volunteer organization. The Church Safety Guys is a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to inspire, influence, and impact church safety and security teams. We are protectors, guardians, ambassadors, and shepherds. We are about all things church safety and security, which starts with a ministry mindset and a servant's heart. Join us for the next hour as the Church Safety Guys unpack safety, security, leadership, and ministry operations with your hosts, James McGarvey and Mike Scully. This broadcast is also available on social media, YouTube, your favorite podcast platforms, and on the all-new Church Security app.
Well, hello and welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. I am James, one of your hosts, and I'm joined on this broadcast by my co-host, Mike Scully.
What's up, sir?
Hey, you can't do it without laughing.
I know. Well, joined on this broadcast, it's like almost every broadcast, but anyhow.
Well, you got me. I have no. It is what it is. I've got to retool in my mind. Okay, how do I want to introduce Mike? But everybody already knows who you are. So, I mean, if they don't by now, there's a problem, right?
Well, we get some new listeners, obviously, but
sure,
don't fully know everybody. But I would think they've either found us via something on our social channels, or they were told by somebody, they saw us in person, they read our books. Any one of those things probably introduced them a little bit at least, but we'll see.
For sure. Well, if this is your first time joining us, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, you can reach out through our website at churchsafetyguys.com. And you can visit our YouTube channel and catch up on old episodes that we have and old content. And then, as always, you can download our free app at the Church Security app. And you can actually go through your iOS or a Google Play Store and download that and register. And it's got some great resources. So it's a good tool that's out there, and certainly on our website we've got some great resources with books from really leadership content all the way to devotionals to starting your team and that sort of thing. But as always, you can reach out to us through our website, and if we can help you in any way, we will absolutely do our best to do that. So I had an interesting, before we jump into the topic, I had an interesting morning, and Mike's laughing. For those of you in podcast land that hear this later, Mike's laughing because he knows the story and knows what's coming. But I was on my way to church this morning, and one of the guys on my team texts me, and he's like, I get this little text video, and I'm like, what in the world? And he's like, you'll never believe this. And I'm like, what's on the video? Like, I couldn't even see it. So he texts me and he says, I've got this 30-pound raccoon that's chasing me down in the parking lot. And he's like, I don't know if I should shoot it. Should I shoot it? So I said, dude, there's nobody. And this is a group chat, like with all of our team leadership. I'm like, if there's a 30-pound raccoon in your parking lot and it's chasing you down at this time of the day, this was like, almost 9 a.m. I said, it's probably rabies, it's probably got rabies and you probably need to shoot it. So apparently it started chasing him from about 30 yards and then went diagonal, like did a 90-degree turn. Like when it saw him, it immediately veered off and went towards our building and then circled back around him. And apparently one of our HVAC systems had like a little tiny crawl space, and it went in there. And so he kind of like cautiously went over to it to look at it and see if it was over there. And it was up actually in the building. Like we have a facade on the outside of the building to cover our HVAC system. And so it had crawled up into that little section. And So one of our guys, one of the assistant directors of our team, is he owns his own HVAC company. And so he's on this group text and he's like, well, go in after it. And I'm like, hashtag not it. I text back. I'm like, hey, you're the HVAC guy. I'm not professionally trained to go into the HVAC system after this 30-pound raccoon.
And somebody puts a bullet in your AC system.
No kidding. So it was hilarious this morning when it happened, but it kind of prompted us to have a serious discussion, which comes to our discussion tonight in firearms, right? But the serious discussion was, what do you do? Because we live in a community where there's farms all around us, and as the city moves out, we're seeing those farms disappear, but also we're seeing wildlife come out. We've seen fox, coyotes, raccoons, deer, etc.
Right.
And I asked the guys today, I said, so how would you handle it if this was like a Wednesday night and a dog came and maybe started growling at somebody, or maybe an animal came out and started foaming at the mouth, going after one of the kids, or how would you handle it? So it prompted some good discussion, because we kind of said, how do we handle this as a team, and how far do we go with keeping people safe and that sort of thing. So, but
well, my little story was not as applicable to tonight's topic, but it is applicable to very common topics. I was actually doing some additional kind of event work for a local organization here, not the church, and had to actively de-escalate a person. And so I'm just sitting there. I mean, of course we do that at church, but this was more of a secular event at a local hotel. And so I'm sitting there channeling my ace card, okay, and I'm sitting there saying,
he's channeling his inner John Riley, folks.
well, wait, you're killing the punchline here. I was literally saying, WWJD, what would John do? So that was kind of what I was thinking. But in all seriousness, it was a matter of kind of de-escalating the woman, giving her a couple of choices, and she ultimately turned around and was frustrated and left. So I just found it very interesting that in the moment that I'm like just thinking like, okay, what would John do? It was kind of hilarious.
I liken it back to the old Disney cartoons where Donald Duck is my favorite, but he would have the angel on one side and somebody the devil on the other side. And whenever I get into a de-escalation situation now, I pretend that John is like sitting on the side saying, okay, you go through your ace card. This is how
yep.
This is how you handle it.
You know what? I've heard it enough times at this point that it resonated, that it triggered literally in the moment, that it was just like a bing moment, and a light bulb went off, and I channeled it. So it was good.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, our topic for today is firearms, and we don't typically do a lot with firearms because sometimes they can be kind of a polarizing topic. But I think that every once in a while it's a good conversation to have, and try and set a little bit of a parameter on some things that you can do to mitigate that discussion at your church. And so on this broadcast, I had the honor and pleasure a few weeks ago of meeting Mark Garner, and he's in Michigan. And I'm sorry about that. I'm trying to get him to come down to Ohio. Actually, I'm not, because he's what makes Michigan cool. But I'll go ahead and bring him into our conversation here. So, Mark, thanks so much for joining us tonight to run through your background and just kind of go through some of your experience.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it all started on a summer night in '79 when my parents met. My background started with what I thought would be a long, enduring career in law enforcement. I went to the local junior college for criminal justice in the late '90s, early 2000s. However, there was a big hiring boom in law enforcement in the late 90s. So by the time I was qualified and ready for employment, no one was hiring. So I made my career in the armored truck field. Started out just working routes, jumping trucks, jumping routes, and just through training and growth, I became the regional loss prevention manager. And that's where kind of my firearms training took over. I was in charge of all the loss prevention training, from firearms training to defensive driving to counter surveillance, things of that nature. And because of my contacts and networking there, in 2012 was when I started Absolute Security Group, which started primarily as an executive protection company, and has since just really broadened out to cover a multitude of the security aspect.
Awesome. And I met you a few weeks ago at the Grand Rapids PD conference where we were with John, and you had a great presentation on firearms and church safety, and that's, for those of you that are listening, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring Mark in as a guest, because he had a great presentation and was really biblically minded with some of his thoughts on firearms and using firearms. And like every other topic, we always try and look at it with a ministry mindset and from a biblical approach for church safety. And sometimes it's kind of hard to do that, because oftentimes when you talk about firearms, it goes down the tactical, bunny trail of saying, hey, we have to do everything a certain way, or it kind of takes some of the ministry aspect out of it. So tonight I kind of want to go through a few things, and we can kind of talk through some of the answer some of the fallacies, and hopefully get to talk through some of the general concerns and things to keep an eye on with firearms and your place of worship. But for starters, I want to talk about the biblical approach and why biblically it applies, and it applies to have firearms. And of course, safety and security in general, not that it's behind me, but there's a great book and great resource that talks about biblical application and stuff. But yeah, and by Mike. But having a church safety team, one of the questions we get asked an awful lot is, how does having a firearm relate to a biblical ideology? And when we were at the conference, one of the things that John had kind of commented that I agree with is, in Bible times, obviously there's quite a few references to swords and using swords as protective devices. Probably no firearms, because obviously firearms weren't around yet. But we can talk about that for just a little bit, as far as having a ministry mindset with that. And I'll throw it over to Mike. Did you have anything you wanted to?
Well, I might just tee up the whole thing by throwing out the first bomb of the conversation, and really, or maybe it's a frag grenade. I don't know, however people will take it. But the thought process is, we're talking church security, so let me throw the first one. The first one is that it's not about the gun.
That's right.
And so we'll unpack that further, is that church security is not about the gun.
Well, and that's one of my pet peeves. Mike, that, and all the guys that are at my church know that, when they come up to me and they'll say, I want to join the safety team. And then the next thing out of their mouth is, do I get a gun, or what do I, I'm just like, sorry, you're probably not the right person for this.
No, you know what? Go down to the down the hallway. The fourth door on the left is our armory at our church. No.
Oh my goodness, Mark, what are your thoughts on all that?
No, I agree completely. It's not about the firearm; it's about the position. It's about the heart. It's about the mindset of the person who wants to get involved. And that's what we stress on our church safety team. Same thing, James. if we get those individuals, hey, I want to join the safety team. Okay, great. Where else have you served? You know, that's one of the first things that we inquire. You know, because you get so many of the alpha males in our fields of work that, you know, I get the facade of having a firearm and carrying a gun, but that's not in the church setting. You know, that's not where we need that. Church is, you know, you're looking for protectors, not bouncers, is how I always try to put it.
For sure.
Amen.
And I think you mentioned one of the things at the conference, but one of your thoughts going along with that was the idea that someone should be serving at other places at church. And you just mentioned it, but someone should be serving in other ministries and have that experience before they come to church safety. And I love that, because it really does, it gives them a chance to be mature and to mature at the church, but it also gives you as a leader the opportunity to see, because if your ministry is overlapping like it should, then you know, you'll see a lot of hopefully you'll see a lot of interaction with that person, and you'll be able to address where their mindset is and how their heart is with serving.
We always, before an individual, anyone who is an armed team member on our safety team, it's by invite. And those who are invited are people who have been or are currently serving in a different ministry. We want to see their passion. We want to learn them, not in judgment, but what's your relationship with the Lord like? You know, what's your family life like? Are you a good husband? You know, there's so many things, you know. Before a church will appoint a deacon, there's certain criteria that he must meet to be in that leadership role. And we take that same serious approach with anyone that we're willing to train up to be an armor bearer at our church.
That's very big, and it plays right into kind of the phrase you kind of said, protectors, not bouncers. One of the ways I say it is, I'd rather an usher that I can make lethal than a tactical person that I have to teach how to pray. That's
right. Amen.
And I love you gave the illustration too, Mark, of I think you had an Army Ranger, or I forget, someone came up to you and they were like, hey, I want to join the safety team. That's really cool. And you were like, so where's your heart with the Lord? And he was like, how's your relationship with your wife?
Right. Yeah. I had a guy on my team who, I mean, we leaned on him for a lot of our training. He's a special forces combat vet. And, you know, I love the guy like a brother. And he visited our church and he said, man, I think I want to do that. I want to join your safety team. And I was like, well, where's your heart? Where are you and the Lord stand? And his exact words were, you know, I'm not into all that churchy stuff, that religion stuff. And I said, then, you know, you're overqualified for my security team, but you're underqualified for my church team. So he was eliminated immediately. It actually cost us our friendship. That's why that story is so fresh, you know. But I mean, it happens.
For sure.
And that plays right into another grenade I think I'll throw out there, is that it's not about the caliber of the firearm, it's about the caliber of the person.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you can put a billboard sign up, hey, who has a firearm and wants to do this, and you'll get a bazillion recruits and probably a bazillion lawsuits too. But you know, but yeah, it's definitely about the heart. We seek out those who have a kingdom heart and a ministry mindset.
For sure. That's awesome. And I know smaller churches, if you're listening to this, oftentimes that can be frustrating, because you can say, well, I only have a few people here and there. But I would honestly, I would say, and I would encourage and say, you know what? I would rather have fewer people on a team that have the right attitude than, you know, a team of 10 or 15 people that don't have the right attitude. Because honestly, missing that attitude when you're talking about the the overlap and umbrella of church safety and security and how that goes into all the other ministries. Having a group that has a horrible attitude operationally or ministry minded with that is just a very big detriment. And the reason is because once you get that going, it's very hard, once you have that culture of having a bad attitude or having just, that focus, it's very challenging to turn that ship around. And, we talk to churches all the time where their pastor will reach out to us and they'll say, my church safety team, security team runs like a club. How do we turn that around? And, it's very, it's very easy at that point to just throw up your hands and walk away because, people are set in their ways and they just aren't interested in trying to change their ways. And then, you get the alpha male personality, like you mentioned earlier. And, we're all stubborn. We all want to do things a certain way, and it plays into it hard. So
if they're pre-service conversations on a Sunday morning when it's basically you're in for that 15 seconds of fame, if you will, when everybody's walking through that door and you're screening and you're preparing for the purpose of your day. That's really the challenge, I think, because so many, I feel like there's folks that are there and they're talking about their gun, their caliber, the latest piece of gear they put in their EDC. And you know what? It's not about that. We opened the show with that, but it's not about those things. It should be about, is your team going through a devotional? Is your mind right? Have you put away what was on your mind coming from the parking lot? Have you put away that road rage, that last argument that you had with somebody? Is all that put aside? Because none of that can enter those doors. None of that can enter the mindset and readiness of where you're at as you start to go into that day. And so you need a chance to really effectively make that transition. And it's not from, all right, the hat I'm wearing when I walk in, to let's chit chat and just kind of talk about gear. It really is, you're making that transition. You are literally setting yourself up to walk out on stage. Are you prepared? Is your mindset right? And are you thinking about what you might have to do? Because if you're not going to be ready.
That's right. That's right. Just this morning, being up north here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, without going into all the detail, there's a very publicized incident that happened recently. And when I got to church this morning, before my team was beginning to take our positions, we were going through our regular debrief. And when I walked up, everyone was discussing that incident. And everyone has an opinion about this and that and how they would have done this and that. And I felt I should have said something, but thankfully another leader jumped in right away and was like, "Hey, it's game time. That's of no importance to us right now and what we are called here to do." And he immediately, he wrangled the whole group in. We encircled and we prayed and got our mindsets back on track. Because, Mike, I absolutely agree with you. When you're serving in that capacity, you don't have any room for distractions in that time frame and in that moment.
Yep, absolutely,
for sure. It's hard, and one of the things that we're in a transition period right now because I'm leaving my team and going to another church and or church plant, and I've got a gentleman that's working with me that we're moving him and his wife into that leadership role. And we had that discussion the other day, and he kind of commented that he was a little bit nervous about making the right choices and being focused and being ready to go. And I said, the reality is, if I've been doing this at the same church for almost 15 years. And if I come in on a Sunday and I'm not a little bit nervous about making sure my focus is where it should be, that's a pride issue, because I don't want to be the person that's walking in that's like, oh, I got this. Not, anything that can happen today, I'm good. I've got this because I've experienced it all, and I have that attitude. I would much rather come in with an attitude of, you know what, I can't do this without God's help. And, you know, if I don't have that focus and that attitude, you know, every Sunday seeking him for wisdom, then I'm going to end up in a situation where I can't handle it. And, you know, I've seen God test individuals, and, you know, to say, okay, where's your focus? Is it on me? Or because you didn't ask for my help? And I really don't want to be that individual. You know, I don't want to be the one that God tests, you know, because I missed praying that day, and instead of, you know, focusing on him. So it's definitely a spiritual battle. And I think that, I think focus does go straight along with that. I would much rather have an individual that's less concerned about, you know, caliber, like Mike said, or firearm per se, than someone that's so overwhelmed by it that's the end all, you know, save all, cure all, that sort of thing. So
you said a good point there, James. In the spiritual battle component is we can sometimes get so wrapped up in the physical battle, the idea of carrying that, wearing that gun on our belt, and that the element of, oh my gosh, what if I have to go hands on, or what if I have to draw? Well, the reality is, are we spending equal amount of time preparing for that spiritual battle that could be occurring, but long before we get to the physical? Because somebody could be, you know, it could be the devil that's driving that behavior. It could be sowing that seeds of doubt, sowing those problems that are being creating that environment by which creates something that bubbles over, that then results in a safety team having to step up and get involved in some way. Are we praying through that spiritual battle? Are we putting on that full armor of God as we walk into service for that day?
Right. That's right. Preach.
for sure. So we need to take a quick break, because we're actually at the halfway mark. But when we come back, we are actually going to jump in, and we're going to talk about the other two things. I want to talk about policy and insurance, because I know we get asked a lot of questions about that. And then also I want to try and jump in a little bit on ongoing training and what you can do to set stuff up. So we're not saying don't have a firearm. All three of us, I'm pretty sure all three of us carry at our churches. But what we are saying is that if you do choose to have that, there's more to church safety than just a firearm. And, you know, you need to be just as eager to have that, again, the ministry mindset of focusing on where your mind should be and where your attitude should be, even so far before discussing that. So anyhow, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
At Centurion Bible College, we're authentic about relationships, we're passionate on training, we're unapologetically biblical. And as the first college in the United States to design an associate's program in church safety and security, we're innovative. Explore Centurion Bible College and you'll find the tools to be better prepared to support your community and the mission of your church, the culture to help you engage with the people you serve with, and the environment to foster learning and leadership. Discover Centurion Bible College today. Enhance and develop the skills to engage and connect with your community when they need you the most. Be intentional in your community with a ministry mindset, understand concepts of safety and security, and make a difference today. For more information or to enroll, visit centurionbc.org or churchsafetyguys.com.
The Church Safety Guys help church and place of worship safety and security teams all over North America through our broadcasts, online communities, conferences, trainings, resources, and the all-new Church Security app. Download it today. Help us continue to reach churches by supporting our sponsors, purchasing our resources, and consider becoming a ministry partner by making a monthly or one-time donation. Remember to like, subscribe, and share this broadcast with your team. And now, back to the broadcast.
All right. Welcome back to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. We are talking on this broadcast about firearms and the use of firearms at churches or places of worship for church safety. And I want to toss it over to Mike, who's going to throw another myth grenade into the mix for the next discussion.
So I figured before we go down policy and insurance and other sorts of parameters there, is that people have this idea that because you're a church or because you're on church property, is that you can do whatever you want. But that's not exactly the case.
For sure. And I will say that it is nice to have an outline of policy. It's nice to have some kind of guidance. And to be perfectly honest, there are some states that require it. You know, I know that in Ohio, and I think Michigan is similar to Ohio, but in Ohio, you have to actually have permission from the church before you are allowed to carry. And it's not just a church, it's phrased place of worship. And just recently, we actually changed in Ohio, the governor just signed a new law into effect that actually changes the prosecution. And I'm not going to try and say that word because I'm going to fail, but basically the degree to which an individual is prosecuted for disrupting a service. And so we're starting to see, thankfully, we're starting to see states step in and really up the charges on folks that disrupt services, but at the same time also give churches and places of worship that right back to say, look, you guys make the decision if you want firearms or not. We're not gonna do that for you. And so churches always still have the right, obviously, but the reality to what one of the things that Mike just said is that the leadership really does need to be on board, and the church needs to be supportive and understand what the purpose is and why that's an important thing. And I'll throw it over to Mark if you want to jump in and add anything on that.
Yeah, no, Michigan has the exact same law that any house of worship or place of worship, you have to have permission from the church leadership in order to carry on that property. One mistake that a lot of smaller churches will make, I was actually consulting a church plant just a couple weeks ago. They were renting out a gymnasium space, just a local gym,
Sure.
to hold their church services. And the topic of safety and security came up, obviously. And I explained to them, you're now making this a house of worship. By doing so, that building now falls under that law, because on Sunday at 10 a.m., this gym is no longer a gym. It's now a house of worship, and these laws are now applicable to you guys. And it's people, like you said, people think because it's a church, well, you can do what you want, but there's severe penalty when you break those rules. It really is.
That just gave me another one. It's not about the building.
Exactly. It's not about the building. Right.
And I mean, I think now, don't get me wrong. I do think, and this kind of goes on to the next point of talking just briefly about insurance parameters and policy. But I think there's a way to handle this gracefully. I mean, if an individual, we've had individuals come into our church before, and I've approached them, I've talked to them, I've noticed, hey, you're carrying a firearm, or maybe in a conversation they tell me, hey, I'm like, and I know I haven't given you permission, or you haven't gotten permission, but hey, just as an FYI, and this is just a casual conversation, so you don't have to necessarily tackle the person and drag them out, but at the same time, having a casual conversation, I've learned over, doing CCW, CHL classes for almost 15 years, that a lot of times people don't just pay attention to the law or don't understand the law. And so I've run into, okay, let's have a casual conversation. Are you aware that in Ohio, this is the law? And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, no, I didn't even know that.
Mhm.
And at that point, then you can be gracious and say, okay, well, this is the law. This is what the law says. Maybe you should go, or we would prefer if you put your firearm in your vehicle and
Mhm.
secured it. We don't know who you are, but we have a safety and security team that can respond to that situation that, those folks are highly trained and, reassure. So, you don't necessarily have to come across as being aggressive with that individual for making that mistake. If it's in fact a reasonable mistake.
Mhm.
So, but I want to move forward to the idea of policy and insurance parameters. So one of the things, in fact, I was talking to a church this week, and they commented and said, very small church. They have, I think, about 100 people. They commented and said, we've got 1 or 2 folks that carry. And one of the questions I had asked them was, what does your insurance company say? Do they allow it? And they had switched from, I think it was Brotherhood Mutual to Guide One Insurance, and the policy changed. It changed pretty dramatically, and so one of the things that I had emphasized to them, because Guide One was so new to them, I said, you know what, you need to give them a call your agent and sit down and actually have a conversation and say, what's covered, what's not covered, how does this play into what we're doing, and kind of go from there, because every insurance agency has a different way of doing things, and sometimes even the broker agency has different requirements that they'll impose on behalf of that larger company. So it's definitely a worthwhile thing. And then as far as policy, that kind of goes back to what Mike was saying earlier. Honestly, it's good to have something written down so that everyone knows and you can train back to that policy, because you don't want people walking around and questioning and just being confused, because that will really lead to a confusing culture within your team. So establishing some kind of rules and guidelines, and look for those questions that might get asked that nobody's thought of, like, how does your church handle carrying a firearm in church vehicles and off church property? That's one that I get asked a lot. If the church has given you permission, do you also have permission in the vehicles? If you're going on outings and different things like that, and having that policy written down and set in stone, and then training people back to it is an effective way to make sure that everything stays consistent. And what happens if that individual does something unsafe? Does the church have the right to remove permission? Absolutely. Does the person understand that the church has the right to do that? We actually have a letter that we have them sign, and they get a copy of it, but we go through many points like that, and we say, look, this is the guidance. You can agree to do this, but it's on our terms. And if for some reason you deviate from our terms, then we revoke permission. So thankfully we've never had that, we've never had to do that and never had that happen. But at the same time, I like going through point by point that policy, because that gives people the opportunity to understand better, what the guidelines are. So Mike, you wanted to.
Yeah, if I want to look at policy and unpack that for a second in 2 sides. You got policy, which of course is your insurance policy itself. What is said and what is not said is very important. You want to make sure that it doesn't exclude you from having a team that perhaps is in there. You may have a policy that does that. Then you're kind of out of the water unless you change carriers. So you want to check that. They're not going to necessarily, you don't want to have a policy that's so detailed that every line item is spelled out, because that just creates too much of a level of onus on you as a team to try to drive to that detail. Same thing on the policy side of your own policies of what you do in your church. you want to make sure you have guidelines that have leeway, but have range of kind of what's acceptable to how to handle certain situations. Not something that's so rigid that locks you into you had to respond this way, and if
Mhm.
you don't, you're not out of compliance of your own code. That's where you see certain, like even in police departments, you see those their own internal affairs is looking at inspection of their own policy adherence. It's not that they didn't do right by the end person and the outcome was fine. It's that they still violated perhaps a policy. And so
Mhm.
you want to make sure your policies are set up in such a way that equip the team to effectively create a good positive outcome, not lock them in and limit them as what they actually can do.
Mhm.
For sure. Mark, did you want to add anything before we jump on?
You guys covered everything, literally. I was honestly going to speak on what Mike said, but I mean, no.
Okay. All right. Well,
Very well said. Very well
Thank you.
said.
so we'll move on to number 3. So ongoing training, and I know both of you have thoughts on that, but I do want to go back real quick to what Mike just said about making policy too complicated.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I found was not too long ago that we were making at our church, we were making policies far too time consuming for myself. And part of it was I'm not a full-time staff member of the church. I have, a full-time job, and I do a few other things, along with that. But at the same time, what I was finding was there was too much burden on me, and it was getting frustrating because I've got, 20 plus people that I've got to meet with individually, that I've got to qualify, that I've got to do all this shooting stuff. And of course you factor in the fact that nobody has a consistent schedule, right? Everybody's schedule is their own schedule. So
Yep.
meeting with some people, it was getting to the point where I was about ready to shoot myself and say, I'm done. And what I realized was that I was overcomplicating it when I took a step back and I said, okay, wait a second. Now it's great to have training. It's great to have, a policy and parameters and, an umbrella of understanding. If we're not gracious in understanding that, sometimes there's so much time and energy invested into this that we're already asking individuals to be the first there and the last to leave.
Right.
And so now we're asking them to train, and we're asking them to do this and do that. And I understand, I know there will be people out there, I'll probably get emails this week from folks that are like, you're telling us not to train, not to do that. No, I'm not. What I'm saying is be gracious, because there are certain times and whatnot, at least for me, where I realized, you know what, I can't do this. What does the insurance company ask of me? And I'm going to go back to the insurance company. I'm going to rework the policy, and this is what we're going to do. And when I step back, my own expectations and what I was requiring of people was far more than what the insurance company was saying. And so I had to kind of dial back a little bit on, what I was encouraging, and it just made a better culture, better situation. And I wasn't so exhausted all the time about pushing that standard and in that training. So go ahead, Mark, you were going to add something.
Well, just simply, what it's imperative for leadership to understand when they're writing and implementing those policies and all the requirements is just remember that, these are volunteers. These are people who have a servant's heart, who want to simply serve the church. You don't want to institute so many things that you burn out your team, you burn out your volunteers.
Yeah. And that's very true. I mean, the more that you add, the faster you can do that, for sure. And especially if you have, I mean, most people, if they carry a firearm, they're going to want to train. They're going to want to go shooting. It's a fun sport. And, that probably isn't going to be a deal breaker for them if you say, hey, you need to go out and practice. But at the same time, you just need to be aware and understand that, we are asking people to volunteer. So with that, if an insurance company can be gracious and say, look, this is what we want you to have, then, start there and work forward and just keep it simple.
Mhm.
One of the things in going to the training piece of it, we try to do something where every year, basically, we have a team, what we call team fellowship, and everybody gets together. We run through shooting scenarios. We do a barbecue. We basically have a great day of fellowship and bonding, and the people that want to come out and shoot can do that. And we have instructors that will help guide them through. And a lot of times we will use, in Ohio, we use the Ohio Police Officers Training Academy, so OPADA's guidelines for what they do for police officers. We will train people to basically exceed that standard. So that's kind of the standard that we use. I know a lot of folks use like the FBI and other government agencies as kind of a guidepost, and that's fine too. But just from my experience, and I'll throw it over to you guys, is we never want to go to the point where we're training at someone. And I would never say that our experience of training is a pass or fail. It's not. It's okay, if you didn't quite meet that standard, then we're going to bring you up as a team. We're going to bring you up together to meet that standard and to help you with your skill. So Mike, I'll throw it over to you. Do you want anything?
No, I think it's great. I mean, the level of training, I think, is there, and you want to make sure that back to, again, the culture, back to a standard. You got to do a certain degree based on perhaps where your policy is, based on where the state law and what is allowed as to carrying in your church, what your pastors are saying as to, are we going to make this permissible? So you have to have a standard of some sort. I feel like too many churches, and certainly we see in the community all the time, it's another argument, just like everybody arguing over Glock versus Smith & Wesson, or 40 versus 9. They're arguing over this standard or that standard, and did you test this way, and did you do I mean, literally, I went to a class 2 weeks ago, and it was interesting because it was not a church security course. It was a shooting course and a defensive course, but they actually had a Jack Wilson challenge. For those that don't know, Jack Wilson that took down the perp in North Texas. And so that was a long shot, cold, and taking a shot across a long distance and try to put one on paper. And so it was interesting, but at the same point, that's not going to be a standard that we're going to hold our teams to.
Right. And I think there's a lot to be said for that too. I mean, there's ways to go about doing fun things. And I do think from a practical purpose, I think that doing something like the premise of the Jack Wilson challenge, understanding, and I've said this before on other broadcasts, understanding the distance across your sanctuary and across your church to be able to say, okay, I can safely make this shot at 60 feet, at 40 feet, to know your proficiency. I think that's important. Right. Don't get me wrong, but at the same time, the older I get, I mean, I was joking with the guys earlier that I went shooting yesterday and I realized that I really need to have my glasses on now when I'm shooting. So for low level light or situations, maybe there's a distance. I mean, it's 85 feet halfway across my sanctuary. So it's 160 feet from the back doors of my sanctuary to the stage. That's a long distance. Yep. 160 feet, I can't make that shot. I mean, obviously, most people with a pistol probably aren't going to make that shot. But for me to know that means that I've got to clear 2/3 of that distance before I can even think about the possibility of that. That's an important facet for teams to understand distance wise and the mechanics of that. And certainly the other piece of that is understanding the mechanics of, what type of rounds are you carrying? What's your building made out of? That's not even jumping into the whole ricochet possibility. And, in our building is concrete block. And we've said multiple times, if you're going to carry, you have to carry with this type of ammo because we don't want collateral damage.
Mhm.
And again, that's one of our policies that we've written in, and we've said, most understand that and understand that, the importance of that and the ramifications that, when you use that firearm, you're still responsible for, what happens in that situation, even if you're trying to stop a bad guy.
Mhm.
But I'll throw it over to you, and you can add your thoughts.
Well, as far as like standard in training, I love what you said earlier because we follow that same model. If we have someone who's on the team who's struggling, to meet that standard, we're not going to boot them from the team. They're not going to be allowed to carry until they can meet that standard. So I think it's very important at the same time that we never lower our standards. They're set in place for a reason.
Sure.
Because if you're called to act, we got to have you be able to meet that task at hand. I just think that that's super, super critical. And I've seen it with other teams because of friendships and buddies that the standards tweaked or lowered a little bit. So and so can what's the word I'm looking for? I mean, simply pass.
Qualify.
So that's just qualify
Yeah.
in general, right? So that's something that I personally harp on, at times, like, hey, we'll help you, we'll walk through it. But this is something that you have to excel to this level. There's a reason that this standard is set because, Perp is sitting next to pastor's wife, or little Susie who's in service with her mom today, So standard is very important for us on our team.
And I think the other, just kind of wrapping it up a little bit, but I think the idea of having a solid set standard is a good thing, because then you can always default back to a best practice, right?
Right.
So if you say, okay, we're using the standard that the state does at their police academy, or we're doing an FBI standard, or whatever you're using, that kind of takes the that kind of takes the cloud away from you. So if someone doesn't pass that standard, it's not as a leader and trying to coach that person or trainer, it doesn't come back on you that, okay, like what you said, Mark, maybe you're playing favorites and you pass this person, but not this one. When we hold that standard and we go back to, okay, everybody's got to pass this, everybody's got to do this. In a sense, it gives us the opportunity as teams to build each other up and encourage each other to meet that goal together. And that can be a very rewarding, very rewarding thing, and really builds a lot of momentum. I mean, we had individuals, the last time we went out, we had individuals that there were folks that said, like, that came to me and said, I don't want that person carrying a firearm in our church.
Yep.
And I said, I don't know where their skill set is, but we're going to spend the day and we're going to find out, and we're going to help them do better. And, now after spending that day, together, we see an entirely different person because we've built that camaraderie, and we've built that attitude and that culture to say, hey, no person gets left behind. We can train, we can build on that. But again, it also goes back to having the right people with the right attitude. If somebody's not willing to train, or they're just like, I'm done, I'm out of here because this is beneath me and I'm not interested in this, then, maybe they shouldn't have been individuals in that set to begin with. So I'll toss it over to Mike, because I know you had some closing thoughts.
Yeah, a couple closing thoughts on the training side. I think in any case, people can have a sloppy day. They can have stuff going on, and you know what? They go to the range, and with all intents and purposes, especially on a qualified day. I mean, I've seen it in many different cases. You could just be a totally off day. And I think that goes back to, it's not just about qualifying or whatever standard you go by to create that qualifying. It's continuous improvement, and it's kind of a crawl, walk, run. And you got to make sure that your entire team is good at what tier they're at. So if you got folks that are not as experienced in shooters, but they qualify, you still need to hammer the fundamentals. You need to continually go there on that crawl. When they're starting to walk, you're going to start to introduce distance and other sorts of things that they may not have picked up on. You're going to build on those fundamentals that they did. And then finally, when they're actually, running, perhaps that is what they're actually doing, is running. You're going to add some dynamic to the situation where you're building up that heart rate. You're adding stress to the situation, and you're adding dynamic situations so that you're understanding, okay, what can this person do under pressure? Again, it's a build where you want to get people to that ability, and you slowly have to kind of teach them where they are.
For sure. Well, for sake of time, we're gonna go ahead and wrap stuff up. So, Mark, thanks so much for joining us. It's been great to have you.
Thank you guys for having me. Truly.
We appreciate it. Go
I hope
Blue.
to meet you in person sometime soon.
Yeah.
I met the other half and not that impressed, but I'm sure you'll live up to a higher standard.
Well, I do make it up to Michigan every once in a while with in-laws and so forth that are there. So I'll make a point of it to try to say hello.
Mark.
Right. I love you, James. So
I do. It's all good. All right. We'll talk to you next time.
All right. Take care, guys. God bless.
Thanks.
Take care. All right. So just wrapping things up, as always, you can visit us on our website at churchsafetyguys.com. And if we can assist you in your ministry in any way, please reach out to us. We're happy to help where we can. Quick shout out. We are coming up on our Orlando conference very, very closely.
It's less than a month already. Like I felt for so long, it was like so long away, and it felt like, okay, yeah, it's coming. And now all of a sudden it's like less than 30 days away. And
it's like double time on the schedule. So we just wanted to say, if you're listening to the broadcast and you're thinking about maybe picking up tickets, please do, because we're getting to the point of, we've actually sold more tickets than in October, and there are a lot of churches that are definitely signing up for that. So seating is limited because we do try and keep the conference at a low occupancy, so we can just have a better day with folks, more engaging. But quick shout out to some of our sponsors. Just want to thank US Law Shield and also Vertex for being great sponsors. We also
I'm wearing those pants today.
Oh,
you know what?
yeah.
I have a pair of Vertex on today. I'm like, what? I got a pocket for my cell phone, a pocket for my knife. It's great. And yet they don't look like tactical.
Yeah, it's funny. People laugh at me, but I've told a couple of people that I won't wear anything else. Like, I'll either buy a pair of jeans from them or a pair of work pants, because I just like them so much. But we're happy that they're part of it. Certainly there's quite a few other folks that we couldn't do this without. So we appreciate you and the support. Two-Way Radio Center and Motorola. They've done a fantastic job helping us. And a quick shout out to godbrewscoffee.com. You can check out their website, and they've become a quick partner with us, but they have some great coffee and certainly have an awesome mission and purpose as well. So check them out. Until next time, we will talk to you all later. So take care. God bless. Have a great week.
Thank you for joining the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys, sponsored by Checker. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback. Be sure to share our broadcast with your teams. Join the discussion online, and for other great resources, download the Church Security app or visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com. Remember, keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry, and Semper Disciplina. Always be training. Have a blessed week.